A very powerful Dark-type move against that Smeargle, bringing it down to its Focus Sash. Yeah. So you have to wonder, that wasn't a Dark Pulse. It looked almost like a foul play or something?
Yeah.
I don't know.
You do have to, we have to note that the Tapu Fini actually outsped the Salamence as well.
We
saw from the Misty Terrain.
Very interesting.
And the Fake Out. So that is why, of course, Alessio decided to target it. Doesn't want to just eat up a Moonblast or an Ice Beam into the Salamence slot. So this next turn, of course, Smeargle can redirect an attack away. But, of course, the Tapu Fini might have something like an Icy Wind, which is one way to get around that. Yveltal getting a ton of damage off there, of course, and bringing Smeargle down to its Focus Sash. Smeargle really not as much of a threat as it was back in the day. But right now, yeah, really interesting to see Tapu Fini being so speedy. That's not something that's too common, and Smeargle, great way to get around the Icy Wind with that Wide Guard.
Definitely. So it looks like Wide Guard will be successful in blocking a Icy Wind from that Tapu Fini, leaving Salamence free to go for another attack of its own. It's going to be a Tailwind this time around, so a lot of speed control on the field this turn, but Yveltal ready to match that Tailwind with a Tailwind of its own.
Yeah, so however, Tapu Fini here, of course, does commit itself into locking into Icy Wind, assuming it is the Choice Scarf, which is the only logical option given that it's going up against the Salamence. So not an item we see on Tapu Fini very often, but definitely something interesting to note. Yeah, the Smeargle, of course, can go for yet another Wide Guard, but Yveltal will be able to pick it off, and then afterwards you won't have the Wide Guard support, and Tapu Fini can go for Icy Wind after as well.
Yeah, so pretty strong board position for Ben. Even though his Pokemon aren't dealing a lot of damage, he's just maintaining that momentum and forcing Yuri, I think, to either give up his Smeargle for a free switch this turn or otherwise just really try and shake things up. Yeah,
being able to match a Tailwind is a big deal, so I think Ben is probably content to once again walk into this Wide Guard because his Yveltal will be able to at least get the knockout onto Smeargle should it choose to target it. Could also, of course, go for the Dark Pulse onto Salamence, but I think you'd rather knock out Smeargle here. Yeah. Can it survive a Double Edge, though?
I don't know. Oh! It holds on with just 10 health points left. Mega Salamence taking some recoil, but this is the perfect time for Yveltal to go for that Darkium Z, the Blackpool Eclipse Z move, going to deal a big chunk of damage, most likely looking to knock out that Salamence, because otherwise you would have just hit Smeargle with anything, really. So I think it's an interesting play from Ben because he's sort of allowing Alessio to just keep that Smeargle on the field, keep going for those Wide Guards, and even though it's stopping the Icy Wind, it's still enough damage for him to get things done otherwise.
Yeah, and of course, being boosted by the special Dark Pulse attack, it means that you are able to bypass the Intimidate. So Smeargle is going to be able to consider spam this Wide Guard, but Ben probably pretty content with that because it means then you can't put the Yveltal to sleep, and Yveltal is exerting all this offensive presence. So pretty good start here. Being able to match the Tailwind last turn was a really great play, and also being able to survive from that Double Edge with just a couple of hit points, really, really clutch survival there. I think Tapu Fini might finally want to consider switching out. That way you bypass the Wide Guard. You're also able to reset the terrain. Yveltal probably has access to Protect. Maybe you want to go for that. But now that terrain is gone, Smeargle can go for sleep-inducing moves on anything, really. So this might be an opportunity for Smeargle to do so, especially if the Tapu Lele is able to outspeed the Yveltal.
If Yuri's also expecting the Tapu Fini to switch out, this might be a great opportunity for him to go for a sleep-inducing move into that slot. Since the Yveltal, you're just going to knock it out anyways. You don't really need to put it to sleep.
Yeah, exactly. So. We'll have to see what item the Tapu Lele has. Of course, Choice Scarf is typically the common item on these teams, but we have seen a lot of Tapu Leles today without the Choice Scarf, so get some important information this time. I'm sure Ben is wondering as well, but yep, Tapu Fini is going to want to switch out for multiple reasons, right? You switch the terrain in, and that's so good. And Lopunny is actually coming out.
That would be a great Pokemon to potentially put to sleep as Yveltal protects itself. So no KOs there this turn. Looks like Tapu Fini moves first, targeting down that Yveltal with the Dazzling Gleam. Not going to do super effective damage yet onto the Lopunny because it only gains that fighting typing when it Mega Evolves. And Smeargle, again, free to go straight for the Spore into that slot, and it will be asleep.
Yeah, so super free opportunity there to just click attacks, basically. And this is a pretty interesting spot. I mean, once Tapu Fini comes back in, it will really be able to take attacks a little bit better, but of course, Smeargle still is on the field and has access to Wide Guard. Of course, Ben still has one Pokemon out in the back. Groudon would be an excellent Pokemon to switch into right now, maybe even a double switch. That's a great Spore onto the Lopunny because that renders it pretty much completely useless, and Lopunny is a Pokemon that's so frail that it's not likely to really be able to get anything off for the remainder of this game. So Ben kind of in an awkward spot right now, but he still has some really strong Pokemon in Tapu Fini and presumably Groudon in the back, so he's going to want to put himself in a position where they can both be out and relatively safe. And it's really important to not get Spored, which is why you want Tapu Fini and Groudon out at the same time.
And Tapu Fini will be making an immediate return to the field, so blocking any more use of Spore from that Smeargle. So just, again, really great positioning by Ben, and really keeping his options open as he moves forward throughout this game. Yveltal switching out as well, and the Groudon finally making an appearance for Ben. It's worth noting that Yuri has yet to reveal any of his restricted Pokemon, so definitely something that Ben needs to keep in mind. Fortunately, I don't think we'll be seeing any sort of weather wars play out because Yuri also has brought a Groudon on his side of the field, but just a lot of speed control could come into play here, because if you have two Groudons and one moves first with something like an Earth Power or a Precipice Blades, that's enough for you to win the game. Dazzling Gleam will connect with both that Tapu Fini and the Groudon. Doesn't do a lot of damage, and Spore is unfortunately useless.
Yeah, so I think that was definitely the best possible play from Ben's end here, being able to pull out the double switch. Now Smeargle can't really Spore things, and Tapu Lele really can't do too much either against both this Groudon and Tapu Fini. So Yuri's kind of in an awkward spot where he wants to switch, but what do you really switch out? Like, Tapu Lele is probably the better option, because if it is Choice Scarf, and it has been consistently going for that Dazzling Gleam, so you'd imagine it is, then it's not going to really be too content switching into something like the Groudon, because that is in threat of just getting knocked out by Ben's Groudon. But on the other hand, if you just stay in, then you're just giving up free knockouts. Smeargle doesn't have any offensive presence whatsoever, and you kind of want Smeargle around, because that wide guard's actually a really big deal in this matchup as well. So I don't know. I think like Yuri could maybe protect the Smeargle here and just hope that Tapu Lele goes down. But Ben, of course, doesn't necessarily have to knock it out here this turn.
Yeah, Ben has a lot of, I think, momentum on his side of the field just by nature of having that Smeargle down to its Focus Sash.
Yeah.
Like, doing that first turn and just letting it sit out on the field, I think has put Yuri in a constant guessing game, really. Like, what should I go for? Do I try to switch? Do I leave it? Going for the wide guard here, I think, is going to be very important as we see a Dazzling Gleam from that Tapu Lele connect with both of Ben's Pokemon. But, Ben's fully ready to anticipate that, going for the Nature's Madness to get a knockout onto Smeargle.
Not going to see that every day.
I know. I was going to say, that's the only time that you'll see that mechanic, I think, come into play. And a Fire Punch is enough with the Sunlight boosted to knock out that Tapu Lele in one hit as well. So, yes, it's possible that Yuri has, a very powerful Groudon waiting in the back of his party, but I don't think this Groudon is going to be able to take down 4 Pokemon on Ben's side of the field, especially since that Tapu Fini is essentially guaranteed to deal half of its health and damage, provided the Nature's Madness connects.
Yeah, nice play by Ben there to really seal up the game. Yuri's out there was to go for a protecting move with Smeargle and switch out the Tapu Lele. But of course, once again, that's a pretty tough move to make, because Groudon there, I mean, you're staring down at Groudon, which wants to really click ground-type attacks. But,
definitely.
By getting the double knockout, yeah, like you said, Ben in a really great position to really seal this up, especially with Tapu Fini being so fast. You can just Nature's Madness. You're just wanting to scout out. And I think it'll be good for both players to know whose Groudon is faster. So that's something that I think both players are pretty much playing out for at this point.
Definitely, and it's important to learn what other moves this Groudon knows as well. We've been seeing a lot of really interesting Groudon that are running more special sort of attacks, or I don't think this Groudon is, just given the fact that we saw the Fire Punch that last turn,
right.
But you never know, and this is, the more information you can take into a Game 2 situation, the better.
Yep, for sure. So the Groudon actually does avoid, but
right.
Ben's Groudon is going to be faster, is going to connect with the Precipice Blades. So, I mean, Yuri actually could have won that had the Precipice Blades also missed.
Yeah.
And Yuri got a big Precipice Blades off in return. So yeah, also like, it wasn't entirely over. Obviously, the odds would have been stacked very much against him. But Groudon actually could have pulled it back, because if both attacks miss, you double connect. And then you can take an attack from the Yveltal Flop when he stays asleep. I mean, a lot had to go right, but still a winnable game, which is why Yuri didn't give up there.
Yeah, and it is Pokemon, and sometimes we see those things happen.
Exactly.
So it's always worth playing out to those outs. And even if you're in a Game 1, you always get more information that way. So it's almost like a little consolation prize. Like, yeah, you didn't get the Precipice Blades miss, but now you know that your Groudon's always going to be slower. And, when you look at the board and when you look at maybe how you position your Tailwind going into Game 2, or whatever speed control you decide to bring into Game 2, you can keep that in mind. Because It is important to note, Yuri does have the Stakataka on his team, and Stakataka is the one Pokemon that kind of screams Trick Room to me, personally.
Yep, definitely. This next game is going to be interesting, because it felt like Ben was making pretty safe plays overall, but just had the early advantage because of the Yveltal lead. Smeargle probably didn't get as much off as it wanted to. Sure, it protected with Wide Guard, but there just wasn't enough damage from Yuri's end, and the Groudon was rendered relatively useless. And so Yuri's definitely going to want to go back onto the drawing board. I think this is one of the downfalls of using Dawnwing's Necrozma is it is quite weak to Dark type, and staring against Yveltal, you really can't do anything against it. So it's pretty tough to even bring that into this matchup.
Yeah, and it's one of those matchups I think you almost have to concede, you know, before you even enter a tournament, just because it's really that unfortunate. I mean, to Yuri's benefit, you know, the Tapu Lele did have access to Dazzling Gleam, and we did see how fast it was, so most likely is Choice Scarf, and that like sort of gives him an out, but it really comes down to how you maneuver it, and it's just not a matchup that you can really be confident enough in, and I don't think he should really take that risk in this situation, knowing that, you know, the potential to play in day 2 is kind of on the line.
I like the adjustment here, though, bringing in Groudon. And Lopunny actually comes out as a lead, so lots of fun adjustments here.
Yeah, so Lopunny and the Yveltal out on the field for Ben, and Yuri sending in that Primal Groudon once again alongside the Smeargle. So only Fake Out user on the field this time around is going to be that Lopunny. But there is no Misty Terrain around as well, so this could be an opportunity for that Smeargle to try and set some spores up. You know, that Lopunny is only going to be able to fake out one of these 2 Pokemon, and it's a choice for Ben. You know, do I worry about the status or do I worry about the damage? Because even though that Groudon can't connect something like a Precipice Blades with the Yveltal, you know, it can still deal a ton of damage with its Fire-type attacks.
Yeah, definitely, and we haven't really seen Yuri's Groudon. A lot of these Groudons have been running Eruption. Eruption would be really, really deadly here if you just leave it unchecked. So I think Ben definitely is going to watch out for that. But yeah, the main thing that Yuri has going for him right now is that you're going to need 2 attacks to knock out the Smeargle. So that means a potential Spore in trade for a knockout. But Groudon is actually going to switch out. So we'll see if Ben called this and maybe prioritize knocking out this Smeargle.
You know, interesting enough, he does send in his own Tapu Lele,
yeah, that's
which
a great
means,
play.
You know, there is going to be no fake out from that Lopunny, and Smeargle is most likely now free to put something to sleep. Judging by how the last turn played out, it would probably be that Yveltal, but Lopunny going for an Ice Punch, followed by a Dark Pulse to knock out that Smeargle. So if you can't stop the Spore with a Terrain, you can also just knock out that Pokemon and really, I think, take away sort of a key pivot point of Yuri's Pokemon.
Fantastic play there from Ben. Didn't get baited by a Fake Out, just went straight for the offense there. Ice Punch actually covers a bunch of different options, but I think Ben basically making the read, you're going to stay in with Smeargle, and Groudon had a big opportunity to potentially get a Fire-type attack off there, but ends up switching out, doesn't want to get knocked out. That definitely gives Ben a early lead, but certainly far from over. Of course, Tapu Lele does come in. It was also interesting because the Lopunny opted to not Mega Evolve, so that it wouldn't fall to something like a Dazzling Beam immediately.
Yeah, that is very interesting, and you would have to imagine that Ben's not going to Mega Evolve it this turn as well, but that Necrozma, Dawnwing's Necrozma on Yuri's side of the field, also an adjustment he made going into this game.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see it because he, of course, is choosing to bring that out against the Yveltal. So, I mean, Tapu Lele here can go for... You probably want to lock yourself into a Fairy-type attack because Psychic really won't be able to touch Yveltal. I wonder if a Moonblast is enough to knock out the Yveltal. That's the first question. And it looks like the Mega is actually going to come out here. So, basically saying, okay, if you choose to click Dazzling Gleam, then maybe you knock out the Lopunny, but the Yveltal should definitely survive. And I want to get more damage off with Lopunny.
Yeah, I mean, the only situation where I'd worry about the Yveltal being able to survive something like a Moonblast would be if it's holding Assault Vest. But we saw the Z Crystal in Game 1, so we know that that's, you know, potentially off the board. But it looks like the Tapu Lele will be moving first as the Necrozma went immediately for the Ultra Burst. Moonblast is not enough to knock out that Yveltal. And Giga Impact from that Lopunny is going to crash into the Tapu Lele for a knockout.
Whoa.
That is not something you see every day. Fortunately, this Ultra Necrozma will be moving before that Yveltal. So if Yuri decides to, he can pick up that KO, but I don't think he was expecting to trade the Tapu Lele in for that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this puts Lopunny in an awkward spot because it can't attack next turn, but it does guarantee the knockout onto Tapu Lele.
That's pretty exciting.
Yeah, definitely not something we see every day, and this will allow Tapu Fini to now pivot it, and now you can actually spam Icy Wind, which will really slow the speeds of everything down. And if Ben has Groudon in the back, which he obviously did last time around, then after an Icy Wind, the Groudon can just come in and click Precipice Blade. So Ben has put himself into a really good position despite Lopunny not being able to attack this next turn. Great usage of this Lopunny, honestly, forcing a fast Fake Out Air, which often means the Smeargle itself is not going to want to Fake Out. So baiting it, getting a knockout, getting another knockout onto the Tapu Lele, and now with this Scarf Tapu Fini being able to just click Icy Wind. So, I mean, Yuri, if he has like something like Swords Dance on Groudon, maybe can bring this back. But if Ben does have Groudon in the back, I think all he needs to do is just Icy Wind and hit his Precipice Blaze, and he should have this.
Yeah, Ultra Necrozma on Yuri's side of the field, going for a Protect, possibly trying to scout out what Ben's going to do. We see, again, that Icy Wind from that Tapu Fini going to lower the speed of that Groudon by 1 stage. So all Ben has to do is figure out how to get that Groudon onto the field and maybe handle that Necrozma well enough. But it looks like Groudon's Precipice Blades will not connect with that Tapu Fini, instead only dealing damage to that Lopunny, but Lopunny itself still able to hang on.
Yeah, meaning it can actually even go for another Giga Impact. Yeah. So the decision to Mega Evolve earlier was a great one because it means that Lopunny being so fast means it outspeeds the Ultra Necrozma as well before it gets an attack off. So I've been really impressed by it. I think, yeah, Ben here even gets another attack off with Lopunny. I didn't think he needed to. I thought the best case for Yuri is if you are able to knock out the Lopunny and maybe dodge your Precipice Blades. And here we go.
It looks like Yuri went for that double Protect, probably hoping that that would somehow tie into his win condition. Unfortunately, he did not get it. Icy Wind will deal damage and lower speed of both of these Pokemon, and Lopunny free to go for another Giga Impact, could go for something like the Ice Punch if it wants to be able to move next turn to deal super effective damage to the Necrozma, but it looks like Giga Impact honestly does enough.
Goodness.
So, you know, if your opponent's down to 1 Pokemon, maybe it's okay if you don't attack the following turn. Or maybe you just hope that Precipice Blades will actually connect with something. Unfortunately, misses that Tapu Fini again. Pick up that KO and sort of, you know, leave a nice door open for your Groudon to come in and clean up.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, Ben had some opportune dodges in this game, but they really didn't matter too much given that Lopunny just was really the MVP. I mean, Yveltal being able to take that Moonblast as well, being able to survive, I am sure Yuri wasn't expecting the Giga Impact to just get the knockout.
Yeah, it really was just the 1 Icy Wind, I think, that Ben needed to ensure the fact that his Groudon would outspeed Yuri's Groudon. So even though those Precipice Blades did not connect with that Tapu Fini, you know, as long as the end game essentially would boil down to Groudon versus Groudon, you know, Ben already had that locked up.
Right. I mean, Yuri can still win this off Ben missing his Precipice Blades here.
Yeah, that's true.
And a return critical hit. So it's not over. Once again, it's just heavily favored for Ben.
All right, well, here's that Icy Wind, just going to slowly chip away at the Groudon, you know, maybe buying some time so that these Groudons can, like, adjust their glasses and try to make sure their Precipice Blades connect. It will connect with Yuri's Groudon, and Ben is moving on 7-1 going into the final round of Swiss here in Columbus, locking in his Day 2 invite, and Yuri is sort of on the line. You know, he could take 1 more loss, but at that point, it would sort of be up to how Top 32 plays out to see whether or not he makes it.
Yeah, I mean, this was a pretty tough matchup for Yuri, to be honest. You're bringing in a Necrozma and a Groudon against Yveltal. That in itself is already quite difficult. And this game really felt like it was decided after that first turn. To be able to knock out Smeargle and not let it do anything and not take any damage in return is really, really huge, right? Like, Groudon had a big opportunity to go for a fire-type attack, like a Fire Punch or an Eruption or even a ground type like Precipice Blades there. But the fact that Yuri basically started the game down 4-3 meant that all Ben needed to do was trade Pokemon, and that's exactly what he did. Really impressive showing by the Mega Lopunny there, though, effectively getting 2.5 knockouts.
Definitely. You know, his Tapu Fini was really interesting as well. Like you said, you know, it's not really a Pokemon you see with a Choice Scarf. You see it with one of those Pinch Berries or, I don't know, some other defensive item. But in this case, it just moved fast, and that was all it needed.
Yeah, to be able to get these fast Icy Winds off is a really big deal. I also, you know, with Choice Scarf Tapu Fini, you're also just able to naturally go before Rayquaza and Salamence on all these really, really big threats. And so, definitely not something we see very often. At first, when the things came out, I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And then, which, you know, obviously Yuri prioritized faking it out. Had Double Edge gotten the knockout onto Yveltal game 1, could have been a very, very different game.
Definitely.
But I think Yveltal typically, even though it is very speedy, very offensive, is still a rather bulky Pokemon. So as we saw, it can take attacks like the Double Edge, like the Moonblast, and it was really critical being able to survive and retaliate with damage. But Mega Lopunny really putting on a clinic that second game, and great first turn play by Ben, not just going for fake out, going straight for the damage. And there's really no need to fake out there unless you are predicting Yuri to fake you out in return, which is actually definitely a very probable play. So Yuri there, turn 1, had he gone for like fake out and a fire type attack, completely different game. But Ben made a very hard read, and it paid off perfectly after turn 1.
Yeah, I'm glad you kind of brought up, the fake out versus fake out argument, because I feel like one of the reasons people first started looking at Lopunny, way back in 2016, was the fact that it was so fast, and you could, win those fake out sort of speed ties, even though there's no speed ties involved at all, against other fake out users. And it's cool to see it back sort of in that role. It certainly is a very interesting Mega Pokemon, and it almost reminds me of the Mega Medicham that we saw from Graham earlier on this stream because, very powerful, very offensive, not very defensive.
Yeah, so frail. Like you have to play